My name is Alex, and I'm 38 years old. I was an economist, and my life revolved around numbers, graphs, and endless data. From a young age, I was captivated by mathematics. I remember how in high school, I became obsessed with finance and economics, and how my parents beamed with pride when I got accepted into one of the best universities in the country. I always believed that if you analyze the economy carefully, you could predict the future, identify patterns, and avoid crises. I built my career on this logic. I worked at top firms, conducted analytical research, and advised senior managers. Everything made sense, and all the systems were predictable. At least that's what I thought. My life was meticulously organized. Mornings started with a cup of coffee and a quick check of the latest economic news, followed by hours spent analyzing reports, forecasts, and data. In the evenings, I would review stock movements and currency fluctuations. The world of finance was my second home. I felt at ease in it. All my friends and colleagues were just like me, focused on numbers and driven by success in business and investments. We were all convinced that if you could master this world, you could predict your own success. That day, everything felt especially secure. I was working on a major financial report, reviewing the statements of multinational companies, analyzing global market trends, and forecasting currency movements. Everything was going according to plan, but that was just the surface, the facade hiding what I could never have predicted. Suddenly, as I stared at the graphs on my screen, I noticed something strange, a sudden drop in stock prices, a cascade of markets crashing worldwide. At first, I assumed it was just another brief correction, but deep down, something told me that this wasn't just another blip on the radar. My vision started to blur, and then out of nowhere, I felt a sharp pain in my chest. It all started with a feeling of unease. The pain in my chest intensified, and I knew something was terribly wrong. I grabbed my chest, but the pain only grew worse. My body felt like it was failing me. I tried to stand up, but my legs felt weak, and I couldn't move. The world around me seemed to fade to gray as I sank deeper into a state of panic. The financial markets that once felt like home now seemed irrelevant. All that mattered at that moment was the crushing pain in my chest. My body was telling me something I hadn't paid attention to before. And then everything went black. I lost consciousness, and when I awoke, I found myself in a place that was neither familiar nor real. It wasn't a hospital or a dream or any place I could recognize. Everything around me was shrouded in an almost ethereal stillness. The air felt light and there was no sound, no movement. My senses were disoriented and I couldn't understand where I was. I had no physical form. I wasn't in my body. It was as if I was floating in some vast, boundless space, disconnected from everything I knew. The sensation was surreal, peaceful yet strange. I couldn't grasp the magnitude of it at the time, but I knew that I was somewhere beyond the physical world. And then in the distance, I saw a figure. It began as a soft glow, and as it drew nearer, I could make out the shape of a man. The light surrounding him was blinding yet gentle at the same time, and I had to squint to take it in. It was him. Jesus! His face radiated an intense warmth and understanding that I had never seen before. There was no fear in him, just a profound love and compassion. It was as if his very presence could heal everything, and I knew without a doubt that this was no ordinary man. He gazed at me with kindness, his expression both knowing and compassionate. For a long moment, I stood there, frozen, unsure of how to respond. I wanted to speak, but no words came. His gaze was steady, and I felt it go straight to my soul. It wasn't like looking at another person. It was as if he was seeing me, truly seeing me. Every thought, every fear, every moment of my life laid bare. And yet there was no judgment, only a profound understanding. You've spent too long searching for stability in a world that can never be stable, he said, his voice soft yet powerful. The words struck me like a lightning bolt. I had spent my entire life building a career based on the idea that I could predict and control the economy, that if I just analyzed the data hard enough, I could foresee the future. But here, in this moment, everything I had believed about control and certainty began to unravel. His voice was calm, but there was an undeniable power in the way he spoke, one that made me question everything I had known. You relied on numbers and forecasts, but you missed the most important thing, he continued. The world cannot be stable if we forget what truly matters: love, relationships, and inner peace. You thought that wealth, success, and career would fulfill you, but they are only illusions. All that you have built on these things is destined to crumble because they are temporary. You must understand that life is not built on material wealth. It is built on inner peace and human connection. His words felt like a deep truth I had never before considered. I realized in that moment that everything I had worked for, every analysis, every forecast, every career milestone, was meaningless in the face of what truly mattered. Money, success, status, they were fleeting. They didn't last. I had devoted my life to understanding and mastering the economy, but I had neglected the deeper questions of life. What was the point of all this? Why had I spent so much time pursuing something that, in the grand scheme of things, felt so hollow? As the realization hit me, I felt the weight of it all, the emptiness that had been lurking beneath the surface of my busy life. The financial markets, which I had once viewed as a fortress of security, seemed like nothing more than a fragile illusion. I felt like I had been living in a world built on sand, and now the foundation was crumbling beneath me. The true crisis wasn't economic, it was existential. It was a crisis of values, a crisis of humanity. Jesus didn't condemn me. He didn't criticize me for my life choices. Instead, he gently pointed out that everything I had been chasing was just a distraction. In this space, I was confronted not by guilt, but by an overwhelming sense of love and compassion. It wasn't about judgment, it was about showing me the way to something more meaningful. And in that moment, I realized that the true wealth in life wasn't found in financial success or material possessions. It was found in love, relationships, and the peace of mind that comes from living authentically. He continued speaking, but I was no longer just listening to words. I was absorbing the very essence of what he was saying. It was as if his words were peeling away the layers of my life, revealing the truth beneath it all. In that space, I understood that the real crisis wasn't the crash of the markets. It was a crisis of human connection, a crisis of understanding what truly gives life meaning. And the real challenge was to live in accordance with these truths, to shift focus from the external to the internal. When Jesus finished speaking, I felt a deep sense of peace. It wasn't the kind of peace you find from resolving a business problem or making a successful deal. It was a peace that came from understanding the fundamental truths of existence. He didn't say much more, but in that silence, everything became clear. It was no longer about controlling the world around me. It was about finding harmony within myself and with others. As I stood in this otherworldly place, feeling disconnected from everything I had known, I still couldn't quite comprehend what was happening. The sensation of floating, weightless yet grounded, was unlike anything I had ever experienced. There was no sound, no movement. The space seemed endless, vast, but not empty. It was as if the very air itself held a deep, unspoken meaning. I could feel the absence of the physical world, but instead of feeling terrified, I felt an incredible sense of calm, as if I was exactly where I needed to be. For the first time in my life, I wasn't preoccupied with numbers, financial data, or forecasts. There were no spreadsheets, no market analysis, no deadlines to meet. It was as if everything I had been obsessed with for so long had fallen away, leaving room for something far more significant. My mind, which had been so used to the noise of everyday life, now seemed free from the clutter. And in this strange, still place, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace. As I looked around, trying to make sense of my surroundings, the glow in the distance became brighter, and the figure slowly took shape. My heart skipped a beat when I realized what was happening. The figure was not just any ordinary being. It was a man, radiant with an aura of light that seemed to emanate from every part of him. His presence was calming, yet powerful. It was as though the very essence of the universe was contained in that one being. I could feel an energy, an infinite warmth that seemed to embrace me, even though we were not physically near each other. The man's eyes met mine, and I instantly knew it was him, Jesus. There was no mistaking the divine presence that filled the space. His face was serene and full of compassion, but there was also a depth to his gaze, one that seemed to look right into my soul, as if seeing not only who I was, but who I could become. His eyes weren't just eyes, they were windows into something far greater than myself. In them, I could see a love so vast that it felt both humbling and freeing. I could not speak. I wanted to say something, anything, but I was overcome with emotion. My heart pounded in my chest, not from fear, but from a recognition so deep that words felt insufficient. I had spent my life speaking the language of numbers, but now I realized that there were no words that could capture the depth of this moment. There was a silence between us, a sacred silence that allowed me to simply be. Jesus stepped closer, and I felt his presence fill the space around me. His very being seemed to radiate peace. You've spent so much of your life searching for stability in a world that is inherently unstable, he said, his voice gentle yet unwavering. You've relied on your ability to predict the future, on your understanding of the economy, on your certainty in numbers, but none of it has brought you peace. None of it has brought you closer to what truly matters. His words weren't harsh, they were soft, but they struck me with the force of a revelation. It was as if he was speaking directly to the core of who I was, uncovering the parts of me I had buried deep. For a moment, I struggled to absorb what he was saying. I had spent so many years pouring myself into understanding the financial world, believing that if I could only control the system, I would be safe. But in that space, in his presence, I began to see the cracks in my worldview. The world I had relied upon, the markets, the numbers, the graphs, was fragile, temporary. And in the vastness of this divine moment, I realized that I had been placing my trust in something fleeting. I was building my life on a foundation of sand. You think you can control the world with your calculations, Jesus continued, his voice filled with understanding. You've given so much of yourself to this pursuit, believing that the world could be measured and predicted. But the true foundation of life cannot be found in numbers or in predictions. The true foundation is love, is relationships, is understanding one another. When you forget this, when you lose sight of the connections that truly matter, you lose yourself. His words lingered in the air like a soft breeze, and I felt them sinking deep into my heart. How many times had I stared at my computer screen, analyzing financial reports, seeking answers in the data, when all the while I had been blind to the real answers? I had spent so many years pursuing the illusion of control, believing that if I just understood enough, I could prevent disaster. But now, standing in the presence of this being, I realized how insignificant all of that truly was. The financial system, the markets, the stock charts, it was all a game that could collapse at any moment. But love, connection, understanding, those were the things that would endure. Jesus continued, his voice filled with a deep, eternal wisdom. The world as you know it is changing, and the systems you've relied upon are beginning to collapse. The financial markets, the global economy, these are but reflections of a deeper spiritual crisis. People have been so focused on accumulating wealth, on gaining power, on winning in the marketplace, that they've lost sight of what is truly important. And when these systems begin to crumble, they will be left with nothing but their own emptiness. A wave of realization washed over me. I could see it now, how fragile the system was, how quickly it could fall apart. The markets that I had studied, the trends I had predicted, none of it was eternal. It was all built on a foundation of human greed, fear, and a desire for control. And when that foundation cracked, it would take everything down with it. But what would remain? What would truly matter when the world as we knew it collapsed? You have a choice, Jesus said, looking directly at me with his deep, knowing eyes. You can continue to live your life focused on the external, on the pursuit of wealth and power, or you can shift your focus inward. You can find true peace, true stability in the love you give and receive, in the relationships you nurture, and in the compassion you show to others. The world is changing, but that doesn't have to mean that you must be swept away by the storm. I stood there, awestruck, feeling a deep sense of peace. His words weren't just advice, they were a blueprint for how to live in a world that was no longer predictable, no longer stable. I had spent my entire career trying to understand how to control the uncontrollable, trying to navigate a world that was built on uncertainty. But here, in this sacred moment, Jesus was showing me a different way, a way to live not by controlling the world around me, but by finding peace within myself. The world would continue to shift, the markets would continue to rise and fall, but I now understood that the only true stability was found in love and human connection. As I stood in his presence, I felt as though all my past struggles, all my fear of losing control, were irrelevant. In that space, nothing else mattered but the love that enveloped me. The systems of the world might collapse, but the love we share with others, the love that connects us all, would remain. You must help others understand this, Jesus said, his voice now full of compassion and urgency. Many will be lost when the world changes, and they will look for answers in the wrong places. Help them find their way back to what truly matters. Help them understand that the key to surviving the coming storm is not in wealth, but in love, in connection, in peace. With these final words, the light around him began to glow even brighter. I felt my heart swell with an overwhelming sense of responsibility. The burden of this message was heavy, but it was also a gift, an opportunity to change the way I lived, and hopefully to help others do the same. The world as we knew it was shifting, but I could now see the way forward. The true stability I'd been seeking was not in the data, not in the forecasts, but in the love we shared with one another. And that was a foundation that would never crumble. As I stood in that vast, timeless space, still trying to grasp what was happening, Jesus' words resonated within me like an echo reverberating through the universe. The tranquility that surrounded us contrasted sharply with the chaos of my mind. My whole life had been spent in pursuit of control, of understanding the world through numbers, graphs, and predictions. But now, as I faced Jesus, something shifted within me. His presence made me realize that I had been chasing something ephemeral, something that could never provide the peace I so desperately sought. The financial world, the systems I had mastered now seemed so small and insignificant compared to the vastness of this divine moment. I wanted to speak, to ask questions, but the words wouldn't come. I stood there feeling vulnerable and exposed, like a child in front of a wise teacher. The silence between us was not awkward, it was sacred, as though the universe itself was holding its breath. And then Jesus spoke again, this time with a deeper urgency in his voice, a sense of forewarning that made the air around us feel charged with a profound truth. The systems you've relied on, the ones you've worked so tirelessly to predict and control, are beginning to unravel. You see it now, don't you? Jesus asked, his voice calm but laced with an undeniable weight. His words cut through the stillness like a blade, and I felt a shiver run through me. It was as if he was speaking directly to the very core of my being, unraveling the layers of my life that I had built around financial success, control, and security. I could feel the truth of his words seep into my bones. The world I had known, the world I had devoted myself to, was no longer stable. It was teetering on the edge of something far greater than I could have imagined. The markets, the economies, the systems of wealth and power, they are fragile, fleeting, and they will collapse. Jesus continued. These are but reflections of a deeper spiritual crisis. People have lost sight of what truly matters. They have become obsessed with accumulation, with winning, with control, and in doing so, they have lost themselves. When these systems fall, they will be left with nothing but their own emptiness. His words were not a prophecy of doom, but a profound warning, a call to awaken to the reality that had been hidden beneath the surface of the material world. As he spoke, the weight of those words settled over me, and for the first time, I could see the fragility of the systems I had once believed in. The stock markets, the economies, the systems of finance, these were all built on human desire, fear, and greed. And as I stood in his presence, I realized how quickly they could all come crashing down. It wasn't a matter of if, but when. And when they did, the chaos would be unimaginable. I had spent my life predicting the rise and fall of these markets, but now I saw that they were no more stable than a house of cards. They were destined to fall. But you still have a choice, Jesus said, his voice steady and filled with compassion. You can choose to live your life in accordance with the world's fleeting systems, or you can choose to live with love, compassion, and understanding. The world around you may crumble, but if you ground yourself in what truly matters, in the love and connections you create with others, you will find stability that is not dependent on external forces. His words were simple but profound. They felt like a lifeline thrown to me, a way out of the chaos I had been trapped in for so long. I felt as though the very foundation of my existence had shifted beneath me. The world I had known, where financial success and career were the ultimate measures of worth, no longer seemed important. I could feel the weight of my past decisions, the years spent chasing after material success, and the emptiness that had followed me all along. I had been so focused on securing a future built on financial stability that I had completely neglected the things that truly matter: relationships, love, and peace. Now, standing before Jesus, I understood. These were the things that would sustain me when everything else fell apart. The world is changing, Jesus continued, his voice growing even more urgent, and many will be lost when the systems they've depended on begin to crumble. They will look for answers in the wrong places, in the wrong things. But the true answers lie within them. They lie in their hearts, in their ability to love, to connect, to forgive, and to embrace each other. This is where true stability is found. His words were like a light shining through the darkness, illuminating a path that I had never seen before. It wasn't about trying to control the world or bend it to my will. It was about accepting the uncertainty and finding peace in the midst of it. A deep sense of peace washed over me, but also a deep sense of responsibility. Jesus wasn't just warning me, he was asking me to act. He was giving me a choice, a chance to change the course of my life, and perhaps even help others do the same. You must help others understand this, he said, his gaze now filled with urgency and love. When the world changes, many will be lost. They will be looking for answers in the wrong places. But you can help them find the truth. You can help them see that love and connection are the only things that truly matter. That is the key to surviving the storm that is coming. The weight of his words settled over me, and I felt the full gravity of the responsibility he was giving me. It wasn't just a message for me to keep to myself. It was something I had to share with others. I had been given a glimpse of the truth, and now it was my duty to carry it forward. As I stood there listening to Jesus, I realized that my purpose had shifted. It was no longer about predicting the future through numbers or controlling the economy. It was about spreading love, fostering connection, and helping others understand what truly mattered. The storm is coming, and many will be swept away by it, Jesus said, his voice steady but full of compassion. But those who are grounded in love, in understanding, will not be moved. They will stand firm even when everything else falls apart. His words were like a promise, a beacon of hope in the face of impending chaos. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I understood what it truly meant to be secure. It wasn't about wealth, success, or control. It was about the love we give and receive, the relationships we nurture, and the peace we find within ourselves. As he finished speaking, the light around him seemed to grow even brighter. It was as though his words had created a shift in the very fabric of reality, and I could feel the warmth of that light in my soul. I knew that the road ahead would not be easy, but I also knew that I had been given the tools to navigate it. Love, connection, and peace. These were the foundations I would build my life on from now on. Remember, Jesus said, his voice gentle but filled with power, the systems of this world will fail, but love, compassion, and understanding will never fail. They are eternal. His words echoed in my mind as I looked into his eyes, filled with love and wisdom. It was as if he had opened a door to a new way of being, a new way of living that was no longer bound by the rules of the material world. The light around us continued to glow, and I felt my heart expand with a sense of purpose and responsibility. I was no longer the same person I had been before. I had been given a new vision, a new understanding of what truly matters in life. The world might change, the systems might collapse, but as long as I held on to love, compassion, and connection, I knew I would be okay. And more importantly, I knew I had a duty to help others find this truth as well. The storm was coming, but I was ready to face it with love as my anchor. As I stood there with Jesus by my side, I felt a new sense of clarity. The future was uncertain, but I was no longer afraid of it. I had found something far more valuable than predictions or control, something that would hold me steady no matter what happened. And I knew that this was the truth I had to share with the world, that love, connection, and peace were the only true foundations that would never crumble. Jesus smiled gently, and I felt the warmth of his love radiate through me. Go now, he said softly, and share this truth with the world. Help them understand what truly matters so they can survive the storm with their hearts intact. And with that, the light around us grew even brighter, and I felt a sense of peace that I had never known before as I prepared to return to the world with a new purpose. I stood there in the presence of Jesus, feeling as if time itself had stopped. The peaceful, glowing light surrounding us seemed to stretch beyond the bounds of space and reality, as though it was not just light, but a presence that carried the wisdom of the universe. For the first time in my life, I felt truly awake, like I was seeing the world and myself through a completely new lens. Everything I had worked for, everything I thought I understood, felt insignificant in comparison to the clarity that now filled my mind. The clutter of my thoughts, the noise of my past life, had all fallen away, replaced by a profound silence, a silence that spoke more powerfully than any word ever could. The choice you make now will shape the rest of your life, Jesus said, his voice soft but strong, carrying a weight that I could feel deep in my chest. You can return to the world you know, to the systems and structures that have defined your existence, or you can step into a new way of being, one rooted in love, compassion, and connection. The world as you know it is changing, and those who continue to live in the old ways will find themselves lost. The choice is yours. His words weren't forceful, but they were clear. There was a decision to be made, one that would determine not only my fate, but the fate of those around me. For a moment, I stood in silence, my mind racing. I thought about everything I had achieved, my career, my financial success, the recognition I had received. All of it had been built on the idea that control was the key to survival. I had spent years studying patterns, analyzing markets, preparing for every potential outcome. But now, standing in the presence of Jesus, I realized that all of that was empty. The pursuit of control, the belief that I could predict and manipulate the future, those had been the illusions that had kept me trapped. And I knew, deep down, that I couldn't go back to that life. It was a life built on sand, a foundation that would crumble with the first real storm. But how? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. How do I let go of everything I've worked for? How do I step into a new life, one that I don't understand yet? The fear was real, palpable. It was the fear of the unknown, the fear of letting go of everything I had known and trusted, the fear of giving up control. Jesus looked at me with deep compassion, and his response was simple yet profound. You don't have to understand everything all at once. Just take the first step. You have been seeking control for so long, but the path to peace is not through control. It is through surrender. Surrender to the love that is always available to you, to the connection that binds all of us together. The first step is to open your heart, to love without conditions, to give without expecting anything in return. In doing so, you will begin to understand what true freedom really means. The weight of his words hung in the air, and I felt something within me begin to shift. It wasn't easy, letting go of control, trusting in something I couldn't predict or measure. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that this was the only way forward. The life I had built, one of financial success and societal approval, was empty. The deeper truths I had been blind to for so long were now becoming clear. True peace didn't come from controlling the world around me. It came from embracing the unknown, surrendering to love, and trusting that everything I needed would be provided. But what about the world? I asked, the fear creeping back into my voice. What about the chaos that's coming? The systems are breaking down. The world feels like it's falling apart. How can I stay grounded when everything around me is changing? It was the question that had haunted me for years, the question that had driven me to analyze the markets, to plan for every possible scenario. The fear of uncertainty had been my constant companion. Jesus smiled gently, his expression full of understanding. The world will change. That much is certain. The systems that have ruled for so long are crumbling. But that doesn't mean you have to be swept away by the chaos. If you ground yourself in love and connection, you will be anchored no matter what happens around you. The external world may shift, but the love you cultivate within yourself will remain constant. That is the foundation that will never fail you. I felt a deep, calming peace wash over me. It wasn't a peace that came from knowing what would happen next or having all the answers. It was a peace that came from surrendering to the present moment, from accepting that I didn't have to control everything. For the first time, I felt free, not because the world around me was stable, but because I had found a stability within myself that didn't depend on external circumstances. But how do I help others? I asked, the responsibility weighing on me now. How do I share this truth with the world when so many people are still lost in the old ways? I was beginning to realize that this wasn't just about me. This was about all of us. I had been given a glimpse of a different way of living, a way that was rooted in love, compassion, and connection. But how could I help others see it too? Jesus looked at me, his eyes filled with love and wisdom. You don't need to have all the answers, he said. You simply need to live it. Show others the way through your actions. Let your love be a light in the darkness. When people see the peace and stability you found, they will be drawn to it. You can't force anyone to change, but you can inspire them. Lead by example. Show them that there is another way, a way that leads to true peace, a peace that transcends the chaos of the world. I felt the weight of his words settle deep in my heart. This wasn't about preaching or convincing others. It was about living a life that reflected the truths I had learned. It was about being the change I wanted to see in the world. And as I stood there, in the presence of Jesus, I knew that I was ready to take that first step. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew I no longer had to control it. I only had to trust in the love that was already inside me, the love that would guide me through whatever came next. Go now, Jesus said, his voice soft and encouraging. The journey ahead will not be easy, but it will be worth it. You have everything you need within you. Trust in the love that guides you, and you will never be lost. His words were like a gentle wind pushing me forward, giving me the courage to take that first step into the unknown. As I turned to leave, I felt a sense of peace that I had never known before. The world around me might still be uncertain, but I knew that I was no longer afraid. I had found the foundation I had been searching for all my life, a foundation built on love, compassion, and trust. And with that, I stepped into the future, ready to embrace whatever came next, knowing that as long as I stayed true to these principles, I would always find my way.